As a Christian working woman, you have many roles, from your responsibility with family and friends to community and work. How do you connect all that you do with all that you are and still have your faith shine through? It's a challenge, but you are up to it. The She Works for Him podcast is the gathering place to empower Christian working women to live out their calling at work by connecting them to God, resources, and each other through powerful faith stories from other working sisters in Christ. Welcome to She Works for Him.
You've tuned in to She Works for Him, where we connect Christian working women to God, resources, and one another. I am your host, Martha Brangenberg, and I'm here today with Catherine Gates, and we're together going to have a conversation with our hope and dream and our prayer, actually, that we said before we started the recording today was all about just praying that something that we say today, something that is revealed, will do just that. Will connect you to God, resources, and to one another, because one of the great things about technology is we can connect to each other through the technology, even if we never see each other in person. So you can do that at sheworksforhim.com. That's sheworks4him.com. Find us with that same name on all social media platforms, as well as YouTube, where you can actually watch this interview. So I think it's kind of fun when we can interact and see each other's facial expressions. So I know I love to watch YouTube and to catch up that way. So please subscribe and join the conversation in that way. Remember, it's sheworksforhim.com.
Martha, a lot of people want to bring their faith to work. We know in our hearts that Jesus is the one person we should not be saying goodbye to as we head out the door to go to the office. The problem is, while we want to keep Jesus close to us, we don't know quite what that looks like. We don't really see people bringing Jesus in, inquiring of the Lord before they start a project or before they have that difficult conversation or deal with that personnel issue. Dara Perreira has been there. She's worked in human resources for the Home Depot, for an apparel company, and for the last 12 years, she's been director of human resources for the Catholic Diocese of Honolulu, Hawaii. Arguably, one of the most challenging positions that she's held. Her job includes the oversight of the school system that's connected to the Catholic Church, which has seen its share of difficulties as they do their best to navigate the uncertainty and division we're all facing. Dara can smile on even the most difficult days because she's come to know in her heart who she's really working for, the Lord. Dara and her husband, Kelly, have 2 children and 2 fur babies. Dara, welcome to She Works for Him.
Aloha from Hawaii. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so great to finally have this conversation with you and get to hear your story. But before we look at what it looks like for you to live out your faith at work, Dara, would you share with the listeners how you became a follower of Jesus Christ?
Oh, I'm a baptized Catholic at infancy, did not step into a church until I was back in college. I had no relationship with the Lord. I had no relationship at that point until I met one person, and that person was Father Herman Gomes. And so, it takes is one person to be Jesus to you. And that opens the door. And literally opened the door. I looked into a campus ministry window while they were having a conversation with college students. And Father Herman came and opened the door and said, "Come on in. You're welcome." And that started my relationship with Jesus. And I've never looked back or turned to anything else ever since. And what was that? I was 23 at the time.
Wow. That's amazing. And I really want people to get that. One person, right, makes all the difference. And we can be that one person for someone in our workplace, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that.
So how does your decision to follow Jesus influence and impact the way you approach your work?
I'm really still growing in this area, and I don't think I'm ever going to arrive in this particular area of following Jesus and how that incorporates or how I approach my work. in the beginning of my career, I really kept it separate. And as I just shared, in college, I found the Lord, and I found following Jesus was my path. And I would keep it separate from the work that I would do, because I didn't think that they were, that it was something that could be integrated. And, that was, I think maybe now that I'm maturing more in my experience as well as my faith walk with Jesus, it impacts everything. I keep Jesus in mind. I keep my faith in mind for every decision that I have to make, big or small. I go back to Daddy to, plug in oftentimes when I need to. So really keeping him top of mind is the key for me in approaching my work. And it keeps me sane, by the way, because I know a lot of women out there, boy, work is stressful. Work is tough. We seem to have more anxiety nowadays in the work that we do because our work is very stressful. So keeping Jesus top of mind, it impacts everything.
So you have an interesting work environment because it's a faith-based entity that you are working for. But even with inside of that, how is it that you're finding how you're living out your faith in your work that you're doing every day?
Martha, in all honesty, I think it's more difficult to live and work my faith in a faith-based organization. A lot of people say, wow, you get to be close to Jesus. And sometimes I can tell you that it's further from, sometimes I wake up in the morning and think, I'm in a faith-based organization, but boy, some of the challenges that I have and the things that we have to deal with, if you want to see your faith shaken, go work for a faith-based organization. Because like any other organization, you have people, you have opinions. And sometimes I feel like I'm even under the microscope even more because I work for a faith-based organization and there's expectations. And so it is probably more difficult, honestly, to work here than it was for, say, the Home Depot, because I'm under the microscope a whole lot.
Sure. We talk to a lot of people that are like, oh, I'd love to leave my job and go work in a ministry, thinking that is going to have a different level of, it's going to be easier. But you've heard that joke where people say, well, a church would be perfect if it weren't for the people, right? We're all sinners and we all bring our flesh into our work, whether we want to or not. And the same is true within a faith-based organization as it is in other organizations. And so you bring up such a great point. The reality is that I give you so much credit for working in HR, because that is alone, my goodness, that probably increases your prayer life right there each and every day, because you have some probably pretty tough decisions you're having to handle. So what a great perspective that is, that we all need to be aware of our faith in every environment that we're in. Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more with Dara Perreira about her situation in her work and what she is doing as a Christian working woman and how God is using her. We'll be right back.
Did you know that God has a calling on your life? It's true. He's called you to bring Jesus to the world. For some, that may look like a pulpit or a foreign mission field, but for most of us, it looks like a construction site, a cubicle, a hospital, or a classroom. Wherever it is that you work, live, volunteer, and invest, that is your mission field. To learn more about integrating your faith into your work and retirement, check out our books, I Work for Him, She Works for Him, and I Retire for Him, by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with your hosts, Catherine Gates and Martha Brangenberg. Dara, we're going to continue this conversation about you as a Christian working woman. And you, at your position, you are the Director of Human Resources, right? For the Catholic Diocese of Honolulu, Hawaii. And my goodness, I always think about people that work in personnel, and I give you kudos, because I can imagine what pressure you have there in all of the decisions and things that you have to do. So how do you, this whole idea of living a balanced life as a Christian working woman, is there someone that you look to that helps you to learn how to do that, how to live a balanced life as a Christian working woman?
I personally think it's hard to find a who, because honestly, I've not come across anyone who has this down pat or what the idea of balance is. Yeah. And so maybe instead of a who, because everyone has such a different situation, a different, philosophy on it, but more of I initially thought of balance as getting everything done and then having time for my family and, things like that. But more of what's helping me is a mindset right now of balance between my work and what's God's work, because I was really attaching myself to the outcomes of a lot of the things that I do, good, bad, or, in everything in between. But there is a very distinct role between what God is asking me to do and what God's job is in taking it forward. Initially, in my earlier career, I would focus a lot more on every single thing. I had to do everything. But really, what I have learned is that I have to work within God's strength because he has to take over those things that I have no control over. And believe me, there's a lot of things I have no control over. And so that's balance to me now are what are the things I have control over and what are the things that are part of God's sovereignty that he has control over, that he will take my work and make it what it needs to be. That's a big shift. That was a big shift for me.
It is so good, right? How often do we try to do God's part and our part? And there's a part for God to do. I was just thinking about the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, right? The disciples didn't have to multiply the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They didn't have to figure out how that was going to feed 5,000 people. They just had to do their part, just go distribute it. And God took care of the multiplication, right?
Amen.
So I love, love, love that. And so that's wisdom. And so, Dara, I'd love to ask you, how do you, when you're faced with a very difficult decision, a challenging personnel issue, or navigating some other kind of business challenge, what does it look like for you to seek wisdom in handling that well, in a God-honoring way?
Sure. I go to prayer and meditation immediately. I need to be silent. I need to pause. And I think there's wisdom in pausing. That's the first piece of wisdom.
Amen.
Is to pause. And what I have a benchmark that I go to, maybe not necessarily who, because, I do have some trusted God-fearing women and some people with experience, and that is always a great place to go to. But at the end of the day, it's me and the situation. And so I have had to come up with some benchmarks, but where further to look who or what is to scripture. And I really believe that the fruits of the Holy Spirit is such a good benchmark for decision making, or how I should show up today, or what, because I take no credit for this, by the way, but I heard once that picture yourself as a tree. And in HR, there's a lot of bumping of people, bumping of heads, things like that. And if someone bumps into my tree, what kind of fruit do I want to fall? Right? What kind of fruit? Is it love? Is it peace? Is it joy? Or is it bitterness? Is it, so what kind of fruit does my manager, Jesus, want to fall and other people to see?
Wow.
What a great word picture. I just have to stop. I was thinking about the rotten apple that probably falls a little more often than we want it to, right? Instead of that beautiful faithfulness, gentleness, whatever that other fruit of the Spirit might be. So thanks for sharing that. That right there was a good nugget, listeners. Yes. I'm taking that one home with me.
What an image, right? And how often do we get bumped? Physically, emotionally, spiritually, or all of the above, right? That is so good. But Dara, I'm sure when we get bumped, right, we have to be prepared. There's some sharpening that's got to be done, right? To make sure that fruit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, right? So it's it's that. So how do you keep your iron sharp so you're prepared for that unexpected bump?
Oh, I definitely need community. There's a relationship that I have directly with Christ, but yet there's so much more deepening that needs to happen with those that also serve Christ. And community is so important, I think. You can't do this alone. And so I am part of small group Bible studies. One is the Unleashed study, which I just love, with other professional Christian women. Yes. Women in the marketplace. That has been so valuable for me. And right now, we have community at our fingertips in technology. I know we can't get together exactly maybe the way we want to, but there's so many opportunities online, and reaching out to those and building friendships that not even within the small group Bible study, but hey, let's visit afterwards. A lot of the iron sharpening happens afterwards when I totally get to be vulnerable and with a trusted group of women or a trusted group of believers that will really help me see things that I may not be seeing right away, and be opening to that feedback. So community is so important to sharpen each other.
So good.
Those were some important things for us to listen to, because number one, just acknowledging that all of us need to be sharpened, and that doing that in community where you can have trusted accountability with other women. And Catherine, your organization, Women in the Marketplace, is one of those places that Dara's talking about, that she's connected through the Unleashed study. And we can put a link to that in the show notes for anybody who might be curious about what that is and what next steps that they could take there. So when we come back, we're going to just dig into some very practical stuff that we can take away as we just talk more with Dara Perreira. And she's the Director of Human Resources at the Catholic Diocese in Hawaii. And we are so grateful to have you here as our guest. We'll be right back in just a moment.
As women, we like to share our special finds with others. That new little shop we just discovered, or a favorite brand that is having a sale. Well, I have a special find for you. The Awaken Podcast Network is a collection of podcasts gathered onto a digital platform with you in mind. No more searching and wondering if the content is relevant. The work has already been done. Awaken Podcast Network even has smaller collections of podcasts focused on specific topics, including a collection called She Works for Him, dedicated to content for Christian working women. So go ahead, unlock God's purpose for your work, and check out awakenpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome back to She Works for Him with Martha Brangenberg and Catherine Gates. Dara, one of the things that we are talking about you today is, just tips and things that God has been showing you and intersecting in your life that is helping you to live out your work as a Christian working woman. So what is one of the top tools that you use to keep your work centered on Christ?
Okay, so I have this love for M's. I'm not sure why, but I call it the triple M. And that stands for Messiah, Manager, Mindset. I really believe that the mindset leads, and the heart set as well, leads everything how we behave, what we do. And so if you think of yourself as being a manager for the Messiah versus the manager for an organization, the Messiah, God owns everything. God owns, even if we have a business or the work that we do, the companies that are out there, I don't like the difference between secular and something that is of God, because God takes care of everything.
Yeah.
And so my role is being a manager for the Messiah as CEO. And when you think about it in that way, you start really adjusting your decision-making processes, your ways of approaching things, because if you know that you're managing this for Jesus, I think it changes everything. So I would like women to keep that in mind, that when you have a challenge, it's not exactly the what would Jesus do. It's more of how Jesus would like me to behave as his manager for the CEO. That brings it a little bit more realistically about how we are to behave and to make decisions. So that's my triple M. I keep that in my pocket. A little bit of Jesus goes a long way.
Well, I like M&Ms, so just adding another M to it. I have a thing for M's too, and it's my part of my initial, but also the candy. And I think taking this to a whole nother level, the Messiah manager mindset. And when you compared it to, it's not really WWJD, what would Jesus do? Because our mindset, sometimes it's not actually the doing, right? It's the not doing, it's the perspective, it's the way you think about it and steward that decision, whatever that manager, that decision might be that you are stewarding. So I thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad that God gave you an affinity to M's, because I think that is such a great takeaway, something that we can easily remember ourselves as a tool.
Absolutely.
And it's the heart set too, right? It's, if you think about what if Jesus were the one doing my performance evaluation? Would he be pleased with that decision, with how I handled that conflict, with what I did to navigate that difficulty, right? Sure. How do you kind of tap into that on a regular basis?
Well, once you have that mindset, one of the things that I think that I've been forming more of is a couple of more M's, by the way, Martha and Mary, right? And sorry, these are it's not only about what we are doing, it's how we are showing up. The story of Martha and Mary, Mary was sitting at Jesus' footsteps, at his feet, listening and being with him. It's more of a being. And I think you mentioned that. And Martha was also, doing some of the work of Jesus, but running around and doing things. Not that either or were bad, but there is a time and a place for the doing and also the being, the putting out there and also the receiving. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important not to ask today. So women, sometimes you wake up in the morning and it's not, what am I going to do today? But how does Jesus want me to show up today? How does he want me to be today? Because I think that's part of his performance evaluation, not just what we do, but who we are, representing him.
Kind of a fun little side tip. And then Catherine, I'll let you close it out. We did a previous podcast and we'll put the link in the show notes with a guest who wrote a book called Mary Morning, Martha Day. And for me, that was an aha moment. At age 55, I finally had, not an apology about who I am. I identify with Martha. There is a time to be busy. We need to do our work. It needs to be accomplished. But having that Mary morning, and often that happens throughout the day, right? I mean, it's not just mornings, but when we're stopping in the middle of that decision and we need to go to Jesus's feet and say, I need your help, or I'm thankful for what you've just walked me through. Either way, but just that picture of a Mary morning and Martha Day. So listeners, if you want to go back and listen to that podcast, we'll include it in the show notes for you because I found it incredibly valuable. So I'm glad you like M's. That's another good M&M there for you. So Catherine, why don't you wrap us up?
Absolutely. We are out of time, Dara, but this has been so amazing. Could you just leave our listeners with one last piece of wisdom that you'd really like them to hear from you?
Sure. Remember those M's, Messiah, manager, mindset. And what we need to do is to pause. Yeah. Our manager is asking us to pause before we go ahead. Our CEO is Jesus, as we serve as his manager. And do we, know when it's time to be Martha and know when it's time to be Mary? That's okay. Right. So all of those M's, if you can remember that in your day, I think that would make your role much easier, no matter what you do. And all work matters to God. Okay, all work matters.
Amen.
So good. So good. Dara, thank you so much. We really appreciate you investing your time and sharing your experience.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You've been listening to She Works for Him with your hosts, Martha Brangenberg and Catherine Gates. We're Christian working women helping other Christian working women to live out their calling at work as she works for Him.
As Christian women, we have many roles. From daughter, sister, friend, wife, and mother to analyst, accountant, executive, or educator, is it possible to balance our roles at work and home in a way that honors God? The answer is yes, and our new book, She Works for Him, will help show you how. Written to celebrate, encourage, and equip women in the workforce, She Works for Him discusses the diverse experiences of today's Christian working woman. Pick up a copy by going to iworkforhim.com/bookstore. You've been listening to the She Works for Him podcast with your hosts Catherine Gates, Nadia Dixon, and Martha Brangenberg. Please like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube under She Works for Him. And to access any of the resources we mentioned on today's show, see the show notes at sheworksforhim.com. That's sheworks4him.com. This podcast was created to empower you to live out your calling at work so the world knows she works for Him.